Welcome to the Tending the After podcast. I hope you're having a peaceful morning. My name is Heather. I'm an administrative guide to the bereaved. I help grieving families trade paperwork for people and corporations for community. Today, I'm going to have some very exciting guests on. I can't wait for them to join, and we'll get them introduced.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you. I'm excited to be here today and talk with you and share with everybody all that I know.
Perfect. Okay. If you want to introduce Boardwalk Bookkeeping and what you guys do, the clientele that you serve, and I'll talk about how I met with your lovely wife.
Yes, 100%. So, Boardwalk Bookkeeping, we're a full service accounting and tax practice. We service majorities B2B clients and high net worth individuals as well. Our background from our founders, including myself, comes from financial advising. We started this company because a lot of our clients were looking for more strategic advice with their CPAs. And a lot of this industry, with the rise of TurboTax and H&R Block, really became productized, where you have CPAs focused on getting out as many returns as possible, which has value, of course, in itself. But what people were looking for is, hey, how do I maximize my tax savings throughout the year? Am I spending the money in my business where I should be? Should I be investing in other areas, etc.? And then there was a hole that we found that we've been able to fill with our clients. So a majority, about 80%, is B2B clients that we work with.
Before I even started filing my LLC, I was following these kind of premier tax accounts online because it's an entirely other world from just hitting submit after your W-2 comes in.
Yes, 100%. And it's actually never knew I was going to be in the accounting space. Financial advising was something I always thought of myself doing long term, but I really enjoy that each business I get to work with and each strategy that we get to implement is fundamentally unique. There's kind of a monotony in advising over time that certain portfolios, certain things kind of you set, invest, and there you go, right? And then you ride the waves of the market. And you might make corrections. There might be some intense times, but a lot of
Best
times,
advisor has you do very little with your actual account.
yes, 100%. And a lot of times it's more of just relationship maintaining with your clients, which is fun in itself. But working with a lot of business owners, it could be, hey, Brendon, I'm trying to figure out how to make payroll Friday and it's Monday. Or we just got a massive $2 million contract and we're looking to expand. And so all of the projects that we get to be a part of, I'm very grateful. And it's kind of allowed me to see a variety of problems, different in a variety of different industries, and realizing that a lot of it comes down to some of this same fundamentals and on the severity of every problem that a business go through. And one that will make it more severe is not being organized, being as organized as you possibly can, even naming your files in a systematic way. All these things that we hated doing at corporate jobs, in a way you should pull some of it, not all of it. All the bad you leave, but the organization and structure, if you try to pull into your life and into your business, will ultimately help you when everything's on fire, which is inevitable. But I think Kevin O'Leary says it best, is that you can wake up and it will be total death and woe and famine. And then that next hour, you got the biggest contract you've ever gotten. And now it's total elation and joy. And you're on top of the world again. And that's being an owner. And that could be within an hour of each other. And so your fundamentals underneath have to be as organized as you can be.
Especially if you're a bit of a smaller business, you're kind of running your own ship, staying organized because your hands are in every pie. So the pie might as well be neat and ready and know where the recipe is.
Yes, 100%.
So I met your wife at a networking event hosted by Accidental CEO here in the Northeast Florida, Jacksonville area. And we were able to get started talking. I don't know if she was able to explain to you what I do, but last February, after my dad died, who was also a certified financial planner, so I'm a bit familiar with the space, I realized that there is no support for grieving families kind of after the funeral ends. There's support with your grief, but there's nothing to help people with that organization that you mentioned when your entire world is now on fire because you've lost a key person in it. And so that's what I do. I take the paperwork and executive and administrative tasks from grieving families that they never knew they were going to get that handled, get the deadlines taken care of so they can be with family and community. And so one of the aspects when we were talking, your wife and I, was
that 96% of all US companies have 0 to 9, so less than 10 employees, meaning someone in that group has to decide on the succession planning.
which is a crazy statistic. That's amazing. And an important element of that is when you're planning for the future of your business and you put everything in your heart, your soul, your time, um, are you planning for a worst case scenario if something happens to you? What happens to your business after that? And how to prepare for that and other questions. So she thought you would have some great insight into maybe some common missteps people aren't making and other things related here.
Yeah, so 100%. I mean, going back to being organized. So there is a couple different things, specifically in Florida, that make it relatively easy that a lot of people don't know about that you can get on file with the state. There are forms called transfer on death, TOD.
Mhm.
And Florida is one of the few states that allows you to register your corporation shares as well as LLC interest and real estate. You would want to do this because it helps avoid probate, which is a very tedious process, especially if you don't have this set up, because a business valuation and its underlying assets can be arduous to come up with value. And so to avoid that entirely, filing a simple transfer on death form can help avoid that process entirely. Now, to take a step further, if you are running, let's say, to think of one of my clients, he owns a landscape company here in Northeast Florida. He'll probably do $100,000 gross this year. Now, if he transferred this over to his brother or his mother and father, if he passed, they don't immediately know how to run a landscape firm. So having succession planning within your structure of your business, I think, is incredibly important. Something that a former leader of mine, Tommy Nickerson, said is that you want to recruit talent early, recruit leaders early in your business, because you want to have somebody that you can lean on. Having an operations person in your business, super important, especially if you're at scale. Another thing that if you are just a solo practice, having a buy sell agreement in place with a purchaser or somebody that might purchase your book from you. If you're a financial advisor, let's say you manage 25 million, you make $250,000 a year. In that world, you're relatively small potatoes, but to an individual advisor, you would be a great addition to purchase that book for long-term revenue, right? And so having a buy-sell agreement on file, that can also just help having a plan with this asset, because 80% of businesses go without ever being sold. So there's millions of dollars that disappear in value because people just close up shop. Right? They go, okay, I'm ready to retire and I want to
And do
close.
those
Well, most of the time it's just they liquidate the underlying assets. It's just, hey, they call their clients, either, family gets a business, it's going out of business, sell
mm,
all of the real estate, everything else, they close the business and it's done. That business could have gone on for another, who knows how long. But again, that is what's tough, is that to your competitors, if you tell everybody, hey, we're closed, right? I mean, the vulture's going to come and they're going to give you pennies on the dollar for your underlying assets to your beneficiaries, and that's it, because your customers are already fled. Having a buy
mhm.
sell agreement with a competitor or if you know that you are looking to retire, planning early with a business broker, or meeting with a regional competitor or etc., can have a plan and actually turn this asset that you've spent your whole life building value in and have an exit plan, rather than it just disappear with just the building, etc. Another layer that can add to your estate plan is trust. So if you own an S corp, which is the most common pass-through entity taxation election for most business owners, there are three types of trusts that can own your business. You can form what's called an electing small business trust, an ESBT. That trust is an irrevocable trust, and it itself will pay taxes on behalf of the S corp that ownership moves out, and the underlying trust documents can be a lot more robust than wills. So wills really kind of have, especially if your estate is relatively complex with a business and maybe a couple different pieces of real estate, retirement accounts, etc. Wills can be contested. Wills are good if you have maybe one beneficiary, you have a house, not too many other assets at all. Easy peasy. You don't need to spend all the money that it takes for a trust. If you have a business that's doing a million, 100,000, couple $1 million a year, multiple uh, real estate withholdings, you absolutely need a trust because you can implement what's called a directed trust service, which allows a corporate company to manage your trust on your behalf and help take care of all the bills, put in place a representative for your business, help transition that so that the business can still be owned by your trust and run and give theoretically infinite money to your family trust after you pass. And you don't have the tension that sometimes happens by placing a family member as a trustee. And the corporation is held to a higher legal standard and has obviously no dog in the fight for what happens to the assets, and they must execute what happens in the trust, which just guarantees that how you want your succession planning to go will go that way. And also, what we found, it leads to less tension among family members. And it's a lot of pressure sometimes for people to be appointed fiduciary. You feel, oof, that is so much so fast to take on. Which, going to you, Heather, your business takes on such a, underserved area because you're absolutely right that I'd say 10 out of 10 people have no idea where to start, and they are honestly looking for the service. They don't know what to call it, but I feel like so many people are because it is so hard. Dealing with the emotional portion of losing a loved one and what that means to your daily life is a burden that takes years to over. I mean, I am an accountant. I hate to call the IRS. You know what I mean? And I couldn't imagine having to do that on behalf of people that are who you loved, who you now have to work through their life, and their finances and the good and the bad and everything else in it, right? You know what? I had an uncle who passed when he was relatively young. He was 48, and it was tough on my grandfather because wasn't always the best financially, so there was different things that they had to take care of and stress, and that took a lot out of him at his age. And he probably should have found somebody like Heather who came in, helped square this away, because again, takes a piece of you, I would say, for
Yeah,
somebody to have to go through that.
and I tell a lot of people, if you're lucky, the first time you have to do it, it is the first time, but that also means that you've never done this before, you've never stepped into it, and this is your maybe first time dealing with grief on this scale. So I feel very honored to be able to help people in this very precarious time, and I appreciate you highlighting and understanding the value that that can bring. As for business owners with this buy to sell, that's what you called it, the buy to sell agreements, how soon or how forecasted do you see these being set up? Like, is it as soon as someone kind of starts hitting routine six figures? Is it when they've started thinking about eventually relinquishing the business?
Yes, I would say when they're thinking about relinquishing the business and stepping down, because you can actually even buy life insurance policies on behalf of your owner, like a partner. So this is something a lot of people don't know. And from these buy-sell agreements, you can go to a firm like whoever big name investment firm, and buy these insurance policies that fund that purchase for you, right? So it, number one, is life insurance. So it's a non-taxable event to the beneficiary, and it guarantees a set price. So you and the insurance adjuster come together and say, okay, he's this old and we're going to think that he could pass away this time, whatever. You come up with a price. You pay for that insurance, and then on death, unless the owner, the partner can buy them out in cash, then you have this ability for it to transition. Everybody gets paid out. Everybody's happy, right? And so the loss is that the owner, the business partner who's paying for the policy, or the business that's paying for the policy, that income, if they live extra long time, can end up maybe being more than what the payout is, right? So if you have somebody that lives 20 years past and you pay those premiums for 20 plus years more, that's the drawdown of a life insurance policy or buy sell agreement. But majority of the time, it helps lock in a guaranteed cash payout, especially if the family's like, hey, we don't want to own the business at the end of this. We'd rather take the money and run in that sense. And so that just kind of helps facilitate um, that exit.
And what percent of the business owners that you work with would you estimate have had that conversation with their family of, if something were to happen, would you take over? Would you keep running it?
Surprisingly little. And this is something that through my trust company that I have been trying to educate my clients on, is that it is definitely something that always kind of feels ethereal and out there. And, it's a later thing that I don't even need to grasp at. But the unfortunate reality of life is we don't know any of it from day to day. We pretend to know and plan, but we still don't know what will happen, even in an hour from now. And I think there's also a, definitely a sense of overwhelm of like, what does that mean? That it takes a little time. So that's something I've noticed with people that finally get trust set up, is the conversation happened last year. We started talking about it. It's how do I want these things to happen? Because there's an emotional impact that is something I ask for wealthier clients. I say, okay, well, are we doing trust for your kids? Are they going to get money while you guys are still alive? You're going to give them money for their life, and or not? Or, what happens to it? Are you going to put limits on their money? Are you going to give it all in lump sum? And if you're married, what I advise to people is definitely have that conversation now and to hash it out and debate, because you're definitely going to have different thoughts on it. Sometimes it's right aligned, but those conversations, I think, are what makes it hard. Because ultimately, I'd say 99% of people, when I die, I want my family to benefit from my life, right? We all can agree on that. The nitty gritty of it, though, of who gets what, it's better to start now and start chipping away rather than when it's more prevalent in your life and the pressure's there.
Yeah, making those decisions in the heat of the moment, and that moment is hot. There's an asset that's whittling away because you're not actively putting into it, and something has to happen. We just make so many assumptions on the basis of that's a later problem. It's not something I'll have to deal with in any sort of proximity. And that can be on the business side. There are much more pressing issues to take care of than what happens when I die to this business. That can be a lot of most people, when they think of someone's just died, they think of inheritance and a will, the tchotchkes around the house, who gets the grand piano. There are so many assumptions on everyone's side about what's going to happen, and just an open, honest conversation doesn't have to be pointed or direct. That could help.
Yes, 100%. And I think what I would advise to everybody, and I know that me and Heather definitely benefit from this, but I truly believe it in my heart, and this is how we set it up, even for my trust, to put my money where my mouth is that trust directed services, using Heather's services for administrative work, the emotional impact that it has on families is so much harder than people can put into words. And I know that people probably have gone through loss, and it is immense. And, you know, the service that you will get and the stress relief that you will receive it's not even pound for pound, because it is so much more. Not having to worry about what's next and just having it done for you is a relief that is intangible. During those crises, during those intense times, having somebody just lead you and say, hey, put on your shoes, do this next thing, right? You do this thing over here. You can just be in your grief, but your mind and your life, it can move forward. And also all the different layers of grief, there's anger, there's all of this stuff. And when you have family who's then trying to be objective in this, it's impossible, right? And people don't put the same type of reverence. Like, you don't have a doctor go care for their family member because they can't make objective, reasonable decisions. And in the same essence, no matter who it is, a corporate company or a business, or, you can, in Florida for directed trust service, there's few companies that can, but having a corporate trustee or any third party will help make that process so much smoother. Avoid any of the pitfalls that are just so easy to fall into while emotions are high. and stress is high, and you might not be sleeping, and you're, have no idea what is going on, especially if it's a spouse. It's incredibly hard.
Your entire life has just changed and no one told you that that day was going to be today. Do you find that business owners as compared to non-business owners are a bit more open to having third parties involved in these very personal, emotionally charged situations, or are we all just people at the end of the day?
Yeah, interesting. I'd say that, yes, successful business owners understand the kind of fundamentals in which Rich Dad Poor Dad teaches you, and that there's people that are better than you, and you should for service be able to pass those off to people that are better, because the return on value that you get is, of course, if it's the right business and whatever venture you're doing, should come back to you in spades. And I'm a big believer in that myself. I don't if I was sued, I was not going to represent myself in court. I don't fix my own car. If I'm sick, I go to the doctor. And that's how people should view this too. You didn't overnight become a trust professional or dealing with administrative work on when somebody passes, like Heather, over the last year plus of owning her business. It takes time and experience, and this will be a brief period of your life, and you're going to have to make decisions that could have huge tax and financial consequences for the beneficiaries moving forward. So for the rest of their life. And so, you need somebody just as much as you need somebody if the car was broken down.
I tell people sometimes when they're like, oh, well, everyone goes through grief, everyone has to do this. I'm like, yeah, you can do it by yourself. A lot of people have. But there are also a lot of things that everyone has to do, like cook, clean, that you can hire on help to make your life easier. And those are not particularly as emotionally charged. There's always ways to reframe it, but especially with like setting up a trust, with getting administrative support after losing a loved one. If you haven't thought about it, if you put it to the side, by the time you need it, you might not be ready to make that kind of choice.
Yes, 100%. You're exactly right. Our company, by the way, just to let everybody know, is led by Jeremy Riggs, CEO of that company called Boardwalk Trust. He has been a CFP for 10 plus years in Fidelity, managed over $1 billion in their marathon account, and then now manages around 50 million at Base Wealth and leads our company here. So he has tons of experience and is a phenomenal individual, very brilliant. And so if you guys are ever looking for estate planning services work, please reach out. We're more than happy to work with you all and be able to help.
Perfect. You kind of led us right into my next bit, which is if there was anything you wanted to plug, places for people to reach you, any specific services we hadn't mentioned that would be of interest to someone listening to a podcast like this.
Yeah. And of course, my main firm, Boardwalk Bookkeeping, bwalkbooks.com is our website. We offer fractional CFO services, bookkeeping, quarterly tax filing, and annual tax filing, payroll. Any of those services you guys ever need, we are available. I'm located in the beaches, in Atlantic Beach and Ponte Vedra. Thank you, Heather, for having me on today. I feel honored. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was wonderful. I learned so much. And then, if you don't mind, I have my 3 questions that I like to ask for interview guests.
Sure.
So, being in the space, the answer is not always what you think it is. Do you have a will or advance directive in place?
Yes, I do. I do have a trust. Yes. Big believer in them, so got one as soon as I could.
Amazing. And then, what is the best funeral or memorial event that you've been to? It doesn't have to be like specific, but what was the thing about it that really shone out for you?
Well, this would be a little bit long-winded, but my great-grandfather owned a company in Monroe City, Missouri, and he manufactured car parts. He got this contract because during Vietnam, he had invented a little crate that was able to help drop these grenades off out of the helicopter without exploding. And that company then turned into just manufacturing car parts, and he grew to around 1,200. Every day he would go walk the line, and he almost knew all of his employees by name. And when Paul passed, I think over 800 people attended his funeral in this small town of 1,200. It shows you that I asked my grandmother, she was my great grandfather, asked how did he live his life? What was his moral center? And his life was summed up in two things, and he said he put God first and to be kind. And so I tried to put those two things in my life and in my business and try to, carry that through. The motto here at the firm is we're putting heart into an industry that's heartless, so that we want to be there for people, look at people first. We all come and live in the corporate world of feeling like we're a number, and we strive to make people feel like people here at the firm. And that's what matters first, is how you're doing, how we can help, and then how we can financially prosper together. Mm-hmm.
To have that many people show up, I was personally touched by how many people came out to my own dad's funeral. To have the community miss you and want to celebrate you, it can mean a lot, especially for the family that's there gathered. And what a great idea to ask and get that takeaway from your great grandmother. So, my final question is, if you have had to endure
I experienced grief when I was a kid. I lost a friend of mine when we were 12. Um, he had diabetes and unfortunately went into a coma and never woke up. And as a kid, it was very impactful because death had been there kind of as a background in my life, just through his grandparents, right? Or, my friend. So it was prevalent, all impactful. But it always, in the beginning, it taught me the finitude of life, and, it used to make me a little timid until I, got older. And when I realized there was Douglas Murray had a great saying, and I leave this with people, is that we all go through our life actively choosing our regrets. And so choose them wisely. If it is like worried for something at work or going to be with your kid, go be with your kid. Whatever it is in life, that is of those short-term negative consequences for a long-term betterment. Choose the betterment of your life. Life is short. And just to even tell you how we started the firm is I was let go from a company that lost a major client. All of us were let go besides the owners. So it was like everybody top down. They lost 90% of the revenue overnight after a contract that they had for 35 years. So it was like they had no idea. But in typical corporate fashion, we got an email that said, you subcontractors for your time, and we no longer need your service. And so everybody was let go. I turned to my wife, had $780 in the bank. Rent was $1,470. So that math wasn't really adding up, there. And I turned to my wife and I said, I think I'm going to bet on myself this time, because I've made these companies millions of dollars, and I'm going to do it for myself. And she knew it was going to work. And, we had 2 weeks, and that ended that week. I signed my first client for $1,500, and we were off to the races after that. And so choose your regrets, everybody. Life is short. We have no idea how long we're going to be here. We could be 12 years, we could be 100. So enjoy it right now while you have it. Thank you. Thank you, Heather.
That's all I have. So for now, good night. I hope you have a peaceful morning, and I'll check in again next time.